All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Agile Leaders, the skill mastery podcast where we help you develop skills to advance as a leader through insights from accomplished founders and operators. I'm your host, Evan Scheid. Today, we're joined by Michael LaVista, the founder and CEO of Caxy Interactive, a software development firm that helps companies go from 100 million to $1 billion in revenue. Michael is also the author of Superpowered, which I am very excited to fully dive into. I've had an opportunity to read some of it so far. But thank you so much for being here, Michael.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
The excitement is certainly both ways. I would love to just start by sharing a little bit with the audience about your journey to starting Caxy. And to the extent that journey elucidates, some of the stories that inform the leadership principles and the superpowers, that'd be cool too.
Sure. Yeah. So I've got a really, maybe unusual path to starting the company, and it doesn't really make any sense. I went to school for something totally different, and but I'd always been a musician. In fact, as we were getting set up here on the podcast, I had a guitar in view of the camera that we had to move. And I still do that a lot. But out of college, I was in and out of bands for probably about 5 years afterwards, including a long stint touring the country in an 80s cover band where we played every college and bar from, the Rockies to, the East Coast, and with blue wigs and, parachute pants and all kinds of mesh shirts and all kinds of good stuff. And it was really great. It was really fun. Ended up, my wife was the singer in the middle section of that run. And
did you guys meet that way, or
no? We didn't. I pulled her in Yoko Ono style. So I just kind of said it's time to add a singer. And I happen to know one, right? And no, but she's great. We still do it, and we've had bands for 20 plus years now. It's great. But the end of that run, and so maybe kind of for color, you'll notice I have some gray hair. For color in that story, when I was in college, there really wasn't an internet to speak of, and I remember my senior year handing in an assignment on a disk and thought that was just like amazing technology, and so computers. I'd been a programmer on and off since I was maybe 10 years old. My grandfather was a programmer, which is kind of unusual. He got my cousin and I into it. But the jobs weren't really exciting. That's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to go play Jesse's Girl 1,000 times. So that's what I did. And but near the end of that is when the .com, you may have read about it in the history books, the .com bubble started to grow. And I had two friends from high school who had this kind of idea about technology. He's like, well, Mike, you could probably figure that out, right? So bought a couple of books, and we started a company in the fall of 99. And funny story, we didn't incorporate until January 5th, 2000, because we were worried about the Y2K bug ending the world. So we're like, well, let's just wait on spending money on attorneys until after, the brimstone dies down. So anyway, so for about a year and a half, we did, what'll sound crazy now, we did animated business presentations delivered to you via a custom die-cut CD-ROM. So, a CD-ROM in the shape of your logo. And for you kids who don't know CD-ROMs are, go look them up on the internet. And that was what we did for a little while. And it was kind of an okay idea. But like all good businesses, we listened to what was happening in the market, what our customers wanted, and we morphed from that to kind of kiosks and a web version of that. And that morphed into web, and that morphed into e-commerce, and then eventually kind of software development is where we landed. And I think the business model was really kind of in flux for the first 10 years even, probably.
Okay.
And it wasn't until, I want to say, like 2012 or 13, so the last 10 years has been really just what we do is software development, and not, marketing or animations or video. We used to do everything for everybody. Now we're really just focused on software development. So hopefully that sort of answers the how we got here question.
It does. And one part of that, like earlier part of the journey, I remember a story from the book where you were only charging like $5,000 for a product or project, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like as a service provider, one of the things that happens is like you get this, a phrase I've stolen from a couple of coaches has been, don't negotiate with yourself. And it's like, if you've ever been in a situation where you're like, okay, this should be $100,000, but they don't have the money, and well, they're a nonprofit, and also it should be 61, and you don't realize they're ready to spend 150, and so you just got to go with how much it's supposed to be. And so I had this idea in my head that $5,000 was the most that anyone would ever spend on anything ever, like Lamborghinis, $5,000, and so it was just this number, and I kept hitting the ceiling, and finally, I think I tell the story in the book that I had a coach say, hey, just take a chance. This one's supposed to be 25, just do 25. And they bought it, and he paid for himself kind of that day. So that was definitely a maturation. And if there's one thing that I've continued to do since then, and I guess it's sort of like manifesting this out in the world, is I used to think everything was 5,000, and then I thought it was 25, and then 50, and then 100. And it's like right now, when we start a deal, in my head, I'm trying to solve $1 million problem. So if you call me up, kind of preview, I think you're going to spend $1 million because I think I'm going to find a problem that's worth $10 million to fix, or even better to think of it as it'll cost you $10 million to not fix it. Those are the problems I'm looking for. Maybe 100 million. Yeah.
I love that framing.
Yeah.
Super powerful. Wow, that might be the first time I've heard it framed that way. Super powerful, but it is amazing how like our minds can be such limiting, or I guess liberating, factors. And it's like breaking a 5-minute mile or something. I think, forever it was seen to be this impossible thing. And then one person did it, and within 5 years, a number of people did it. I forgot all the details, but similar.
Richard Bannister?
Yes,
Bannister? Yeah. I think it's in the book, actually. I used to use that exact example. It's a mind. Everything is mindset. That's why when we get to this in a minute, mindset is the gateway idea. Okay. Without that, nothing is possible. With it, everything is possible.
Mm-hmm. When you think about technology leader, given your experience at this point, 2 decades building a really successful firm, working with a lot of different companies and helping drive and catalyze and then ultimately sustain these digital transformations, building this technology. Like, when you think about practical strategies that technology leaders can use to cultivate a growth mindset, are there particular things recommendations or strategies that they can use in order to do that in their teams?
Yeah, so I have a combination. One is who you select, parentheses, who you keep. And the other one is how do you modify what they're thinking about? And so I'll start with the first one because it's easier. And it's in my experience as a person, in my personal life, I believe in everyone. I want everyone to be able to change. I want everyone to be able to grow. The hardest thing for me to learn in business has been that actually people don't change as a matter of a percentage. And so if you're going to make a bet, which you really do, what you're doing is every day you're betting on yourself and the company and the process and how you operate, whatever. That if you're going to make a bet, you bet against people changing, frankly, is my approach. And so I believe you can change. I just if I'm going to bet, you won't. And so it's easier to just look for people who have a growth mindset. And if they come in and they have it and they grow that and they're off to the races, terrific. If they come in and they don't have growth mindset, we get into kind of part 2 of your question, which is, well, how would you teach it? It's just harder. And so, if you can just find it in the first place, that's my preference. But if you're gonna work on it with somebody, I really think it's one of those things that words have meaning in the world. And so it's like, I've talked to my kids about this. They both play a lot of sports. It's like, if you go up to the free throw line and you say, or you think, I'm going to miss this, or, you're paying attention to the crowd, the chances of you making it are really low. But if you go through the process of saying, even if you said, I'm going to make this, or, if you're, I watch a lot of, I watch a good bit of YouTube, and there's like a rash of Larry Bird trash talking videos online right now. And he would tell people, I'm going to go in the corner, I'm going to shoot this in your face, I'm going to make it. And then he would. Well, a lot of that's kind of this visualization growth mindset stuff. So if you go up to the free throw line, you go, I'm going to make this shot, and you say it and you visualize it, your chances are just higher, right? So If you just begin with the practice of, okay, everyone, from now on, we're going to eliminate some phrases from our vocabulary. And some of them are that, oh, that's how we've always done it, or that can't be done here, or Charlie will never go for it, or they'll never. Just get rid of that and just start to vocalize positive, open-ended sort of mindset kind of framings. I think it changes how you think. It really does manifest itself in the world. It sounds crazy, but even just like we started with the how much we charge question. When the old joke is like you walk around with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You walk around with what we solve for $1 million problems, you will find them. And if you
100%.
walk around with a $5,000 thing, you're going to find garbage. And that's just how I think it works. So that's how I think you cultivate that. You start with the language, and then there's there's a lot of literature about it. But I really do think some people are wired up to just consider the idea that I'm going to make this shot.
Yes. The find $1 million problem scenario is just so powerful to me because it also opens up not just looking for like problems, but also looking for opportunities that you can unlock. Which,
sure, yeah,
any business, I mean, there is probably $1 million opportunity that can be unlocked, and now you're in this kind of you're in a top line driver, solution position versus just trying to fix kind of a smaller problem,
You got it.
When you think, well, how do you try to find, I know you are super thoughtful about hiring. You probably learned a lot of lessons throughout the years, but how do you decipher people who actually have, these qualities, this type of mindset, versus what they're just kind of saying versus how they actually show up in the world?
There's this is like a weird word to think of, but the word that comes to mind is bravery. And
Yeah,
you hear,
sure.
like, when you talk to people, and we get into more of the book, like you hear some of the other superpowers that I talk about, like whether it's learning or listening and all that kind of stuff. There are people who, when you talk to them in an interview setting, who are like, they're always learning something new. They've got a lot of questions. They're self-deferential. They realize, like, here's some things I'm going for. Here's what I'm working on. They're just moving in a million different areas. And I feel like the people who don't have it, they've just circled the wagons, and like they are a thing. I am a .NET developer. I am a junior developer. Like they have this description of themselves that they don't realize is sort of static. And without that thought process about what's next, what's coming, what am I learning, all that kind of thing, I think you can kind of see it. There's also like an energy, a vibe component to it even. It's like you can tell people who've got a little extra electricity than everybody else.
Totally. Let's double click on one of these other superpowers. So we hit on mindset, learning, specifically. So let's say we have these, these folks that are wired that way or values aligned. How do you really start to foster and support a culture of continuous learning within, your team?
Yeah, I think you get at it from kind of an unexpected side door, which is safety to fail. Because to learn, you really have to like again, if we're thinking at like the staff level, I'm just working on I'm working on a ticket or something, right? I can either only ever take the things I already know how to do, or I can risk taking something a little bit outside of my sweet spot, but I'd like to learn and I want to learn, and I'm going to say up front, I'm going to have the courage to say, hey, this will take me 4 days instead of what you think of as 2, and I want to take that on and learn it. And so like, that's an example of that. And, from the executive level, because the book for me is more about how I think a lot of technologists fail to become great executives because they just focus on like the doing of things. Yeah. And so like that learning component of always looking for the next thing and so as an executive, creating a culture where it's okay to fail a little bit to go try something new. I think that's what you want, and you don't want to fail a lot. Like I think for a while there, like failing was in vogue, like especially on the West Coast, of like,
move fast, break things.
Yeah. Like I have 3 failed startups, and that's amazing. Well, it's kind of not really, Yeah. So like the idea that you and I think Google, one of their studies was like the thing they found to be the indicator for a high performing team was lack of fear of reproachment from a failed thing that you did. Yeah. And that's the culture that you need to create for people to grow. Otherwise, they'll be nervous to not, to step outside their normal stuff.
I love that so much. One of our, core principles, is you probably intuit, it is around growth, and like how we describe that right out of the gate is that we understand, learning involves making mistakes. Now that doesn't mean that, we're not going to provide constructive critiques and feedback on mistakes, and we don't want to make big mistakes. But being able to make mistakes is an important part of the learning process, when you think about, well, maybe the feedback part actually plays in here to one of the other superpowers. So from a listening perspective, any techniques that tech leaders at Caxy or you've seen others use that improve either their own, like our own individual listening skills, or maybe just a culture of listening within the org?
So I'm going to start with a joke, and then I actually have an idea. So my uncle famously described listening as waiting to talk, which I think is pretty funny. He was a lawyer. But I think like one of the things we do at Caxy that was an interesting innovation was we always have the most junior person in the room speak first. And so, if the lead goes first, guess what? That person's right? And so who am I to challenge that, whatever. But if you start with, well, here's how I would do it. And as a leader, to be open to hearing like, I was going to go in a different direction, but young Charlie here with the new idea, that actually might be it. And I realize you're a junior person, but like the best idea is the best idea, right? So kind of cultivating that idea of, junior people speaking first. I think just generally speaking, being open to being wrong, or not wrong might be the thing, but like being open to input and collaborating. Because I also think, like top-down leadership where they're just like giving out orders, you work harder. That's a harder, life. If you get some good input and listening to people's ideas and implementing them, I think the listening is half the job. Actually following through is the other half. People get more engaged. They want to give you more ideas. It's like a self-fulfilling kind of snowball prophecy. I think that's a key one. And I see a lot of executives reverting to, especially when things aren't going well, I'm just going to command and conquer this. And that just makes things get worse, I think.
When you think about, I think about all the environment that you just described is certainly one that always aspired to achieve within organizations. And depending on different cultures, it became challenging for different reasons. And in some cases, it was very natural and organic. When you think about the kind of exchanges that happen in meeting rooms and stuff within Caxy, and there's passionate debate. Do you guys have passionate debate like that? Like, give me a sense of how you guys create really productive disagreement and
sure
work through problems.
So we have thanks for setting me up for one of our core values. So one of our core values, I think actually, you don't want to rank your values like you rank your children, like you wouldn't want to rank your children, but I think this one might be number 1 or 2, and we call it speak and listen fearlessly. And so we want to encourage and reward people who speak up when you're supposed, not when you're supposed, when the time is right. So it's like, we don't want to hear a month later that this was a bad idea, or that the client should have done something else, or this is just, I just work here, it's not my job, whatever. And further, to be able to hear that, like on something like to be able to listen fearlessly is, I'm getting feedback, or it's a code review and it's not something I would have done, being open to that idea again. And so we celebrate those, and once a week, so during the week, people give shout outs, and you always have to tag it to one of the values. And on Monday, we read them out loud, and someone wins $100 for a Caxy Person of the Week, which is a kapow. And I've gotten feedback from lots of people during like reviews that like that's one of their favorite things. So like you have to, it's kind of dumb, but I think the one of the most annoying things about leadership that I've learned over the years has been, you can't just say something once or even 10 times. It's like got to be 1,000 times important. Like nobody wants to hear this again, and you got to say it again, because so we talk about, here are the 5 things we're looking for, these 5 big values, and it kind of in a way creates like a safe like area to be like, oh, I'm supposed to do that. I'm encouraged to do that. So I am going to speak up. I remember we talked about it all the time. I'm supposed to speak up. Well, now's the time. I'm pulling the chain. We got to stop the train. That actually seems to work pretty well.
And once you almost reach it's like you reach a critical mass in terms of internalization and adoption of these values, and you never have to think about it again. You have to kind of constantly be, vigilant with it. But, in some ways, like certain people can have a little bit more influence or less influence within the organization. Unpack for us, like how you think about influence as a superpower, what that ultimately is for you, and what are kind of some of the best examples of it.
So let's see, what's a good way to think about it? So I feel like I guess the place I spend most of my time is making sure that everyone's on the same page with like the same core set of ideas. And the simpler, the better. Just getting back to the idea of like, you got to say things 1,000 times. Like I'm trying to think of a story. Like when we've had, there's an old thing, like if you ask, if you get your leadership team together and you ask them all to say like something as simple as like, what are the mission and vision of this company? You'll get 7, unique answers from everybody. Like, how did that even happen?
Yeah.
And it's not anyone's fault. It's just you live with it every day and you're kind of subtly kind of modifying it. And so I feel like just like really like simplifying and testing those ideas and making sure they stick. And then it just multiplies out. And it's almost like the job of the leaders is like to keep it super simple and constant. That's kind of where that's kind of where I go on that.
I'm 1,000% with you. What's interesting and been super enlightening and productive throughout all these conversations I've been fortunate enough to have with super, super successful people. It's like over time, you just get this ability to start, synthesizing and you understand the power of simplifying some of these concepts and frameworks that, can tend to be very complicated, but in reality, when you try to deploy these things in the wild and get people to adopt them, simple, straightforward, less is more, is just kind of a powerful first principle that seems
absolutely
to be everyone gravitates towards, when you think about, another one that helps kind of people absorb and internalize, these best practices, values, etc., is storytelling. Why is that a superpower? How do you think about it?
Well, so what I like about storytelling is that it's the thing that I think the human brain is wired up to listen for. Like you're just giving a bunch of bullet points, but as soon as like I hear a story and there's like a character I'm following in the beginning and the middle and end, it works and it's memorable. Like you remember the story I told about it as opposed to like the procedure. We'll tell apocryphal tales about. Like the way we'll teach how to not do something is like the last time we didn't do this and we skipped this step, there's this client here. I'll tell you one. This is why we always pay attention to the time of day of a release and not just the day. We were back a very long time ago before we had things ironed out. We worked for a Chicago. I won't name too many names, but a Chicago institution that was going to have a big launch on a certain day, right? And so 9:00 rolls around and we're kind of coming in, we're doing some stuff and there's a little problem in something. And the client asks us, hey, when's this going to go up? And like, we're working on it. Or just got to upload some files. I'm getting a cup of coffee and hey, is this going up soon? Like what's going on with this? Like, yeah, we said it'd be today. Don't worry. We got it. It's going up. And finally goes up and at like 12:11, we send them, the thing is, hey, everyone, it's up now. And the email we get back is, the governor is gone now. And we're like, what? And like, yeah, the governor was here for an actual physical ribbon cutting ceremony with the big scissors and the whole deal and everything. We were going to cut to the website to show the new website, the thing that we did. And we decided not to. I was like, what? And they never told us that, right? It was like, it has to be live on the 10th. Okay, great. It'll be live on the 10th. No problem. And we were done by 12:11 in time to go get, chicken from Chicken Planet and be done. and they never, so now it's like, okay, what time, And so it's like, you ever look at the end of a contract and it's like, all these little things. It's like, and, you can't have a live fish in the thing. Like, where did that come from? Well, somewhere in the distant past, something happened with a fish that you need to know about. And so we're like, so that story now, right? So now you and I both if I talk to you in 10 years, I can give you the touch point on the governor cutting with the scissors and our website not being live by 11 minutes, right? And that's a memorable moment. And it's funny a little bit. It's very sad, but also, that was a real thing.
So when you guys are instituting certain best practices, ways of operating, you often will illustrate it with a story, a factual story why I got it created. Very cool.
Yeah, and the stories, they write themselves because they happened in real life. And here's the other thing I think about stories, now that you got me on that topic. So at Caxy, there's a number of us who are 7+ years that we call the Caxy OGs. And like, we can go back to these hysterically comic, tragic things that happened to us in the past, and it's a bonding moment. We share that story of, the ribbon thing and the time that we deleted the production database and all those things that are like the funny, tales, like those bring a team together. They get shared culturally. Like, oh, I heard about that. I think that's some of the fabric that weaves you together. And especially as we're all remote now, I think anything you can do to weave everyone together really helps. And probably stories are a good way to do that.
How many folks are OGs at Caxy?
Good question. I think it's probably a team of 8.
Wow.
Something like that. We could almost put a baseball squad on the field, maybe.
I mean, how do you, especially in today's space, it's just how fast things are moving, and it's really a culture of kind of, the way you advance is going to your next opportunity at a different business. How have you been able to retain these folks for so long?
It's funny. So there was a period of time when I accidentally was doing the exact opposite in a very weird way. So the CEO of LinkedIn, at least the original one, I believe is Reed Hastings. Am I close?
Reed Hoffman.
Hoffman, there you go. And he wrote this book called The Alliance, which I now will tell you I think is a terrible idea. But at the time we adopted as the Bible. And what it basically says is, and I think this maybe fits for big San Francisco tech at the time. What he said was, listen, let's recognize that people coming to work for LinkedIn are on a career journey that includes 2 years at LinkedIn, 2 years at Apple, 2 years at Google, 2 years at Facebook, Cisco, blah, 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 on and on and on. And that is what that cohort of people do. So why don't we just be open and honest and say, when you come in, what are the 4 or 5 bullet points you're planning to add to your resume from your time at LinkedIn? Let's call that the Alliance. We're going to make an open thing about it. So for a long time at Caxy, it was like, hey, you're only going to be here for 2 years. So let's figure out, and I think I just did it wrong. So maybe the book isn't wrong and I'm just a moron. But the way we implemented it was basically to presume that you'd only be here for 2 years. And so at the end of your 2 years, you're kind of I guess I should go? What?
Yeah.
And so, right, it was
or
really
worse
weird.
Yet, maybe a year and a half in or a year in it, and you're starting to think about that.
So then I started to go, wait a second, the OG phenomenon, I'd rather have you stay. So what if you wrote the opposite book that was what would it take to build a company and a culture that made it a good idea to stay? And so you think about the reasons people leave. So people leave because you leave, you get a raise, you leave, you get a promotion, all that kind of stuff. Well, what if we kept up with raises? And what if we kept up with, what if we made it if you stayed here for 8 years and over the course of 8 years, your salary maybe doubled and you went from, one of our top people, one of the OGs, came out of a boot camp and is now a senior, engineer, and along the way, learned and grew and all these kinds of things. I think we're providing her a good path that means there's places to go. And if you ever get to a place, I tell this people to people at the company, if you ever get to a place where well, I'm stuck here because I can't get promoted because those 2 people are in front of me, tell us. And I feel 1,000% of the time we've come up with a way to find a new thing. So we'd prefer you stay because you think about, just think about your friends, your college friends or people you've had along for a long time or high school friends or something. You've got a rhythm and together you just do, everything's unspoken. Easier, right? It's easier. And so having new people is hard. So what if we've made a plan to keep them all? So what we've done is try to make it so we have this idea now that we call the Caxy Promise, which is that our goal is to make it, this is the best team you've ever been on. This is the best organized and run company you've ever been a part of. These are the best people you've ever been around. And that promise, by the way, is never 100% true. There are some stinker clients we have. We forgot this one thing, but we're acknowledging our asymptote is this place up here where it's we're trying to go for 100. We're going to get a 91 this month, and we're working on it. And I think that's more than most companies will give you. Certainly more than the FANG people and all the other big stuff. We want to create a place where it makes sense for you to stay and you get value out of it. And we've been pretty successful. I feel our one of the things we brag about is I think our average tenure right now is 4.5 years, which is kind of weird in tech. And I think people are happy and they're having fun and we're doing well with this this kind of role, which is not common.
Yeah. So you called out explicitly, kind of how you address it with comp, career advancement. So things like promotion, et cetera. Culturally as well, like, is there anything else specific that you guys do that you think really drives into that tenure? Like, aside from, I mean, is there like, is there continued learning, or is there like relationships that get formed, between employees, which helps retention?
I'm going to shout out to Hannah Deason, who's our COO, who's probably responsible for 98% of this. But I think what we do pretty well is it's funny when, so she's been doing this for a long time. And I remember when she first started doing it, and the first time I'm saying this out loud, so if she listens, this is the first time I'm saying this. First, when she started doing this, I'm like, is that going to work? And then what she does, she, better than anyone I've ever known, is great at holding people accountable. And so what happens, so here's what I was nervous about. I thought when you hold people accountable, sometimes they don't like it. And they want to rationalize, well, I was sick, or that was too hard, or you didn't tell me, or I didn't have enough. And the fear I had was that they were like, well then, and I'm leaving. And what I noticed is, because maybe for the first time in their lives, they're being held accountable, they owe it to their team to finish this and to do this work and to show up and be your best person. And I think as a result, I'm projecting here, Caxy may be one of the few places you go to where you are called upon to be your best self and recognized for it. And maybe it doesn't happen with your family, it doesn't happen with your friends or your significant person, but here's a place that I dream that you come into, and it's like, this is the place where I get to be, and I'm called up to be my best self. I think that's hard to leave if you're doing it right.
I love that articulation. I think we as humans, certainly the folks that are, populating and contributing to our organizations, we want to feel progress. We want to feel a sense of mastery, sure. a sense of, again, progress. And I think one of the best mechanisms or accelerants to driving progress is like consistency of action. And driving consistency, like accountability, is one of the core, mechanisms that catalyzes, consistent action and making progress. So it's like, however you're getting that accountability, you can get that from yourself to some meaningful extent, but social accountability to people that you admire and respect, I think it doesn't always feel super comfortable and positive in the moment, but I think over time, it's a huge net positive because of what you're able to accomplish as a result of that happening,
Yeah, for sure.
I love it. So one last thing I want to touch on is design thinking and how ultimately, like, is that a big factor in how you guys think about things, how you operate, how you run projects?
It is. And I think, it's funny. I feel like the mistake it's trying to fix that we work mostly in client-driven projects. And ultimately, a client-driven project, well, maybe 50% of the time, is for somebody else. So it's for their customers, right? And I feel like most work that we do, if we're not careful, is designed for an audience of one, which is the CEO of the other company, right? And there's a UX principle, which is like, you are not the user. That's really hard to remember. And because you're like, well, this is me. Like it's like, everyone's really good about talking about themselves, but it's like, imagine you're on a first date and you're like, listen, I am terrific and I am so great. And I have this great house. You got to see my car, and like, I get all custom suits, and like, it's instantly boring, turn off, whatever. You don't want it, right? And so I can't believe I just compared design thinking to that. But I think the idea is, like, if you're really thinking about like how users go through things, you'll come up with different and better solutions. And sometimes they're simpler. And like, one of the things we find a lot with customers is that we try and talk them out of is they're trying to build a really expensive feature for two people in accounting, right? Or this one, like, I feel like a lot of customers are really good at coming up with the edge cases because they've been in the business for 20 years and they are bored with the center 92% of the business. And we're like, yeah, but this is where all the money comes from. And like, yeah, but that's not, they're saying tacitly, that's not interesting to me. That's solved. I want to worry about our people from this weird thing that never happens over here, because that's where they're engaged mentally, and so the design thinking exercise for me is a lot of like, user first, what are we really trying to accomplish? And then go through the steps to really solve that problem, as opposed to like, building a feature just because you're building a feature. That's kind of where, that's my simplistic, boiled down version of that.
It makes sense. Certainly resonates. And I'm sure there are a lot of costly stories in the beginning of the journey that it informed that type of focus, and, seeing scope creep and feature bloat and all that good stuff. I'm sorry, I do want to ask one more question, like a little bit more high level. With everything, that of course we're hearing about AI, experiencing with AI, any, thoughts on how you see AI ultimately impacting the future of tech-driven organizations broadly?
Sure. And maybe in advance forgiveness from our AI overlords when they review this in 13 years, whatever. No, but the way I'm approaching it is, so the metaphor I keep using is like when chess computers first came out, they crushed the grandmasters, and then like grandmasters beat them back, and then there's kind of this Cold War thing, and then eventually they figured out that the best thing you could do was grandmaster plus computer aided, whatever. That's the way to go. And so I feel like with AI, like, will it? Okay, so think of our company specifically. Will it end software development as we know it? And I think it's no. It's just more like, so for example, when I started doing websites, I was one of those people that did website from hand and in Notepad on individual files. And then an IDE came along and made things easier. And then Code Complete, and then all these kind of things kind of advance along. So right now at Caxy, we're using like ChatGPT to be like, anecdotally, like, I have this thing that's supposed to take me 5 days, but I think if I ChatGPT, I can get the first 7 hours knocked out, and it'll be close enough, and I can move with it from there, right? So it's that kind of like assisted thing. I think that's where it goes. And in my estimation, I don't think from clients what we're going to hear is it should cost less. What I expect to hear is we should get more, because really, like, technology, in a way, like technology is sort of like a customers are. Here's my theory. Here's my big theory. Customers are only willing to pay really for the most efficient way to do something. So like, if right now the most efficient way to get this is $100, and someone figures out a way to do it for 80, at 100 you're overpriced, and so you have to invest in technology to get it back down to parity, or you're out of business. And so, with our customers, it's like they can't stop investing in technology and kind of call it a day. It's like their competitors are going to find a better way to build that mousetrap. We've got to find a way to help them build it even better, so they stay stay up with it. And AI is a way to do that. And the joke going on right now is like, nobody actually knows what they really want. So for AI to replace us, a client would have to know exactly what they want to know from the start, and we all know that's not possible. So like,
so true.
So that's part of it. But I do think it'll just be like, we're all going to do more, just like we did more with IDE tools and we did with other stuff. And honestly, what I like about it is, and this is always what happens. The new technology it eats up the bottom 20% of the least interesting stuff that you do. So great. I don't have to write a stub for, this API integration, and then I can customize it. Great. Let's chat through that. That's fine. So I think that's what we'll see. I'm not, I think where I see the interesting stuff that is more dangerous, and maybe it's because it's not my field, like the auto images and the auto articles that AI are doing. Seems like, if I was an artist, I might be a little worried, but as a developer, I feel like and maybe they think of it the same way. Maybe it's a way to get an idea that now I'll riff on. And that's kind of what we're using it for too.
Totally. Certainly how I see it. I think it's an amplifier. It's an accelerant. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Michael, as usual, just so insightful, so much wisdom that I selfishly appreciate and would love to have more time just hearing and picking your brain. I know our audience is going to appreciate it. Thank you so much for making time for us today. And hopefully we can have you on here sometime soon.
I would love to. That's great. And if I can end you with one quick story, I think what I see behind you is a Dallas Cowboys football.
It is.
When I was a kid, I lived in Cleveland, And the Browns, go look up in the history books. I think they lost 9 AFC Championship games in a row. I could be wrong. It felt like 9. And so I picked, I had to pick an NFC team to root for that I wouldn't feel bad about. And so I was a Roger Staubach and Danny White and everyone else kind of fan for a long time.
So
and
my dad played with them.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll have to hear about that.
I will.
What was your dad's name?
Les Shy. I'll show you a picture.
Okay.
Probably knocked down a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Oh my God. Look at that.
Old school.
Oh my God. I'm so excited right now. So the story is that every game day I had gear. I had helmet, jersey, everything, down to whatever. And my dad would throw me passes and I would jump over the couch to catch them and grab it. And I think with a ball, maybe like a ball looked just like that. And I want to go on record because he'll listen to this. He threw a pass too long and it was uncatchable and it smashed into a lamp. And I think we swept it under. And I don't think we told my mom for a little while, but we were in the basement watching some Cowboys. I was all Cowboys from probably 76 to, I don't know, the 90s.
Yeah,
so,
that was a glorious time. It's
now we're in a drought. We're in a drought, my friend.
Certainly in a drought. I just gotta keep it out of mind for a little bit, but this is a cycle. We'll be back in.
Well, thanks for showing me your dad's photo. That was really cool.
Of course. Mike, thanks so much, man. Have a wonderful holiday weekend, and we'll be in touch soon.
All right, man. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.